So quickly, I just wanted to say welcome everybody. I'm glad that you guys came this morning, and happy Monday. It kind of does, as we're talking about things this morning, it kind of does feel like life is starting to get a little bit back to normal. And it's kind of exciting because I think there's a lot of businesses who are looking at how to adjust to the new norm. And I was kind of thinking in my head back to a conversation that we had. It was probably about 3 weeks into the kind of real shutdown. And we were talking about how that was the new norm. And then the idea that we're going to reach a point where there's going to be another new norm starting to develop. And I think that we're just starting to see the cusp of that, right? People are giving up office space in Toronto and figuring out ways to adjust their business model to allow their employees to work from home. And we're just starting to see that. So it's exciting to me because I love when we get an opportunity to talk about it and share what we're seeing with each other, simply because when we hear that information, it allows us to start thinking about what does that mean for my business, and how do I, incorporate that into what's happening for me, or how do I take advantage of that trend that I see happening. Sorry. Okay, so we're gonna just kind of jump into starting with some introductions. So if everybody wants to take just a minute, we're gonna go around and give everybody about 30 seconds to introduce yourself and what you do, just so we know who everybody is, because sometimes we have new faces. And one of the things that we ask everybody to do, just as a part of that networking, is first of all, make sure you put your contact information in the chat box. So I'm just going to start, Kathryn, how about we start with you? Sorry, Kathryn Davies, how about we start with you?
I was waiting for that. I saw Kathryn show up. Good morning, everyone. I am Kathryn Davies, owner of Life's Emergency Training and the city leader for Burlington. At Life's Emergency Training, we are an on-site first aid, CPR, and AED training company, now offering blended learning, which is something that was invented during COVID. Our niche is industrial commercial. We help the HR stay compliant with WSIB restrictions or guidelines, I should say, sorry. And so, yeah, any industrial, such as the trades, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, like that, would be great.
Okay, Julia, how about you?
Hi there, Julia Wooster. I'm in London, Ontario, so I'm about an hour away from you folks. I'm a certified hypnotist, and I help people be the best versions of themselves. The key person I'm looking for right now are people who are nail biters. You guys probably all have lovely nails, but I'm sure you know people who bite their nails and have red, sore nails, and they pick at the skin around the nails, and those are the people I'm looking for. And thanks for having me.
Awesome. That was very specific and brilliant, yeah. Because pretty sure it sounds really bad. We all know nail biters. There's probably a lot more now after COVID.
But she's talking literally.
All right, Maggie, how about you?
I'm Maggie Stice. I'm a writer, freelance. My specialty is travel, but I can do any kind of writing, whether it be anything from emails, social media posts, full articles, and on different topics, not just travel. I'm a copywriter as well. And my target audience is a little bit broader because I can write for almost anyone. So.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Ivan, how about you?
Good catch there. I'm Ivan. I'm the city leader for Hamilton here in this great city. Also, I am a partner at myagency.ca, which is a digital marketing company. So we do everything from web design, SEO, social media marketing, content creation. And we also consult with small and medium-sized businesses to help them improve their presence on the web. That's us.
Awesome. Thank you. Nancy, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy. I live in Hamilton near the Dundurn region, and I'm a medical illustrator. by training. So I create illustrations, animations for researchers and doctors and like biotech or pharma companies. So those would be my target audience, and I will share my contact information in the chat. I have recently, well, this year co-founded a new business with my business partners, and now we have like a team of around 10 part-timers. So this is very exciting.
Awesome. Thank you. Aiden, how about you?
Yeah, okay. So I am Aiden Lefebvre, and I am the curator of Grace Gallery in Brantford, Ontario. I also am a manager of a student residence called Scholars Hall, and so basically with those, my target market for Scholars Hall would be students attending post-secondary education, Wilfrid Laurier University or Conestoga College. Those would be my targets. And for Grace Gallery, it's very broad because I could deal with all the local artists. I could deal with all the local writers who have authored a book. I can deal with, because on my first Fridays, I have author speaking series. So, you know, I do invite authors in here. And if they're local, that's even better. But I do also get some from out of town too. But I also have GGPSM, which is Grace Gallery Presents Social Networking. It is a business networking event, which invites all business owners. It invites self-employed entrepreneurs. It also brings in freelance specialists and all kinds of people from all across Southern Ontario to come and attend that event as well. Right now, everything at Grace Gallery, as we know, because of COVID, is unfortunately not happening. All the live events have been canceled. However, I am still open for one-on-one appointments only at this present time. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Theresa, how about you?
I want to say, sorry, I want to say ditto to what Ivan said, but that's kind of a cop-out. So my name is Theresa, and I'm with my agency. We are a marketing company that does social media, SEO, website design, as well as just regular design. We also do branding, which is one of our brandings is This Great City. And we're implementing that now, which is what you've joined. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Sita, how about you?
So just like I posted, I'm an aspiring home decorator. So I just got into this passion starting this year. And I'm just looking forward to, you know, seeing how far I can go with it, growing it, you know, and that's it really. And I'm here because I just want to network and get some insight and feedback that I can apply in my business and in my day-to-day.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay, Kathryn Kissinger, last but not least.
Well, morning everyone. Sorry I was a little late. We had a power failure here at my end of town. So I'm a private human resources consultant, and I deal in the after-hire management of people, basically. I help with discipline and policies and health and safety compliance and employment law, basically those kinds of things. So COVID has presented quite the interesting set of challenges for my clients with having to lay off, recall, bring back at certain times and skill sets and things like that. So, and now of course, all of these new health and safety regulations around social distancing and things like that. So it's been a bit of an interesting challenge. My target market is pretty much any size business. I focus on the small to medium size and nonprofits that don't have on staff or full-time HR, and I assist them with their day-to-day. But I also go into organizations that have their own on-staff HR, and I help out with one-off projects like creating new policies and things like that. Like when AODA was implemented, and now COVID, for example, we're finding that a lot of policies are needed. So I go in and I get that project done for them and get it rolled out for them.
Awesome.
I put my information in chat, so there you go.
Awesome. I can imagine that you have probably been writing a lot of policies and procedures. All right, well, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's funny because it's actually a requirement, and most of the organizations are just sort of ramping up and not realizing that somebody's actually going to come in and look for these policies to make sure that they're there. So
yeah, and I think that's a really important piece of information for businesses to know, that in those workspaces that the expectations are there. And I think actually I shared on LinkedIn last week the government's sort of expectations. They put out a big document that talked about all of that stuff. But it was interesting because there was some discussion about the fact that we don't necessarily know what the policy is. Every time you walk into another business, we don't know what to expect. So it's actually an advantage to kind of skim through those and get to know them. And I see that Adam just joined us. So Adam, good morning. We just finished introductions, but maybe you want to take a second and introduce yourself and your business.
Sure. I'm Adam. I am a freelance developer and the founder of Adamant Industries. I help other businesses enhance their web presence or improve their applications. I believe very much in perfection through iteration. The idea that anyone who wants to make the website or app of their dreams a reality can do so as long as they spend the time, and as long as we spend the time, and as long as we go through it together, no matter how long it takes, no matter what it takes.
Awesome. So today we are going to have a really interesting conversation about communication, business communication. And so as part of the series that we do every Monday, my job is really about finding out what matters to you guys. So as we're having conversations from week to week, we hear things that are coming up, topics that are important, that we relate to. And so that's how this series sort of was initially developed, and that's how we've continued to build on it. And through the conversations that we've had on this great city, we're always talking about some really interesting things that relate to our business and what matters as we're building our businesses in the community. So what I recognize is that we've talked about social responsibility and why that matters right now. We've talked about the issues around things like politics. We've also talked about how do we present ourselves as businesses. And I really, there was a suggestion from Kathryn Davies about talking about empathy, but I really felt like there was an opportunity for us to take that and really apply it to a very business sort of scenario. And so I'm hoping that you'll all sort of give me a little grace today with the way that we flow this out. It could be very interesting conversations. What I wanted to talk about was understanding how to really connect with our customers, how to really get what it is that we need to learn from our customers. And I'm taking this from a little bit of a social responsibility perspective at the moment. You'll see that shortly, but it's the ability for us as people to empathize and connect to our customers that allows us to build businesses that are meaningful and effective. If we don't know what our customers need or want, it's impossible for us to offer services. We can say, I do this because I love what I do. Great, but do customers care? That's going to create a problem. So I wanted to bring that awareness around to how do we communicate with our customers, and how do we build empathy and really learn to understand them. So regardless of what our personal views are, I think one of the most important things that we need to do is recognize that a business needs to serve three purposes. We need to understand who our business serves. We need to understand what services we provide that they actually need. And we also need to understand how to interact with them in the way that they want. We must have all of those things, because otherwise we're going to have problems with our customer service models. Excuse me. This is the basis for a good business model, but it's a basis for good customer service. So at this moment in time, every interaction that we have really can change what our perception is in the community, or the community's perception of us is. It could change who the customers are that we're serving. It could change whether our customers are coming to us at all or not. And so every interaction between you and another person, between you and your customer, really, it really contributes to gaining an understanding of what this changed environment means to your business. So what we're going to start with today is we are going to start with empathy. And so I wanted to just quickly say empathy is not a challenging definition. It's not hard to understand what it is. It's hard to connect to what it is, which is kind of ironic since that's what it's really meant to be about. It's simply the ability to understand and share the feelings of other people. It's really simple, right? That's it. But what it means to actually empathize is not, I know, I can imagine how that must feel. That's not enough. That's not really what we want. So I'm going to give you, we're going to start with a scenario actually. And we're going to kind of pick this scenario apart, and I'm going to drive you guys really hard in a specific direction. So you'll see why it comes out that way, but I'm going to share the scenario and then we're going to talk about this afterwards. Okay. So Annie and Laura, I got to read this to you, so excuse my reading. Annie and Laura both sit on a board of directors for a nonprofit agency. Annie is a devout Christian who always votes Republican and has religious symbols she often wears or displays. Laura is a professed atheist and liberal who feels that extremely religious people are less intelligent. Both women try to avoid discussing politics or religion, but they both know that the other's feelings on current events and at times, they both know the other's feelings on current events, and at times there is palpable tension. One day, Annie comes to a meeting wearing a shirt declaring support for a Republican candidate for political office, and Laura decides she has had enough. She feels this action is alienating and hostile. She's threatening not only to quit, but also to sue the nonprofit for allowing a hostile environment. Now, a disclaimer. This is broken up into a little bit of an example that I heard and a little bit of something I have seen happen. So none of these characters are actually real, and these are parts of two different stories. You don't know them, trust me. So what I want you guys to do, first of all, is just take a moment and for yourself, and I don't want you to say this out loud, so this is really important instructions. What I want you to do is I want you to just take a quick moment and jot down your own views, your philosophy, your values, what's most important in your reaction to this story that I just told you. And I want you to take that moment to really be okay. And we're not sharing this. So it's really important for you to know this. We're not going to share this. So I want you to jot down what your views are. Just get it out. If it makes you angry, if it makes you frustrated, if it makes you uncomfortable, I don't care what it is, I want you to write it down. So we'll just take a few seconds while I'm yammering on in the background. I know that's kind of hard to do. But we'll take a few seconds just to write down your thoughts, exactly what you feel, how it might be an issue for you, which parts you agree with, what you connect to, any of those things. I love when everybody's quietly doing work. Okay, and we'll give you 10 more seconds. I know it's hard to take a topic like that and go, write everything down. You have 10 seconds. All right. And it's to your benefit, of course, to go back and kind of think about this afterwards. So if you didn't get everything, I agree, Julia, we should have Jeopardy music playing. I didn't think of that in advance. All right, so you're welcome to continue making some notes, but what I want you to do, first of all, is to remember we're not sharing our responses, okay? This is very important. But I need to ask you a question, and I really need for everyone to follow the rule here. So we're going to go around the room, and I am looking for only a yes or no answer. No explanations. No, I agree with so-and-so. Simply a yes or a no. Do you relate to one of these women? So we're going to start with Ivan, because you're at the top left corner of my screen.
No.
Okay. Julia.
Yes.
Kathryn Davies.
No.
Maggie.
I'd say no.
Okay. Nancy.
Somewhat.
Okay. That's an acceptable, alternate. Theresa. No. Okay. Catherine Kissinger.
Not really, no. No.
Aiden.
Yes, but I'm not woman.
Noted. And Adam, what about you?
No, not really.
Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. So the next question, though, is even though you don't necessarily relate, can you look at this situation and feel, we're going to do the exact same thing, and feel like you would potentially identify that one of those may be in the right and one of those may be in the wrong? Ivan, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Okay. Julia? Yes. Okay. Kathryn? Kathryn Davies?
Thank you. No.
Okay. Maggie?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Nancy? Okay. Theresa? Catherine Kissinger? Yes. Okay. Adam?
Yeah.
And Aiden?
I'm glad you left me to last, because actually I used to be a school teacher too at Christ the King School, and I do things fairly. I do things fairly. So I would say I'd really have to give it some thought.
Okay.
And I'd have to hear both sides fully and completely before making any firm decision.
Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair. I realized I actually did that backwards with you and Adam at the end, and I had to make sure that I wrote my notes down properly. Okay. So if I came to you, so there were some people who said yes and some people who said no. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to quickly write down, if you had to choose sides, which one, and you don't have to tell me, and don't tell us. I just want you to quickly write down which one you would probably side with. And again, we're not sharing, so no one's going to judge you, I promise. The important part of this was not to create a controversial conversation. It was to talk about how controversial conversations come up and how do we deal with them. Okay.
Can you remind us what their names were again?
Sure. So the first one was Annie, and the second one was Laura. And yes, so Annie and Laura. I just looked at something.
Which one is which?
Oh, let me read through really quickly again. So Annie and Laura both sit on a board of directors for a nonprofit. Annie is a devout Christian who always votes Republican and has religious symbols she often wears at displays. And Laura is a professed atheist and liberal who feels extremely religious people are less intelligent. I'm not going to read the whole story because you guys already remember the rest. Okay. So what I want to do is actually look at each of these ladies individually. So we're going to start with Annie. And so my question to you guys is, should one of these ladies have the right to more empathy than the other? How many people think yes? Nobody does. Okay, cool.
Yeah, what's funny is I don't think, I think that there's a lot of words in that story, but the issue comes down to one thing, right? And that's it. There's, their backstory I think their backstory helps us to understand why either one of them might make a good or a bad decision, but it doesn't change the fundamentals of whether that decision is right or wrong, right? I mean, the fundamentals are still the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And although I hesitate because, you know, we have the HR professional on here who I know is going to have the HR hat on while she's thinking about this. But what I want you guys to think about, though, is that this is about communication, not about the HR, you know, did she break any policies, you know, that kind of stuff, because that's going to come out in a minute. So if you're not thinking about actions, just empathy from us, recognizing that one person doesn't necessarily deserve more empathy than anyone else is really important. And you're right, Ivan, it ultimately it comes down to, we don't know all of the information, and there are a lot of things that we don't know and understand. So, excuse me, how many people have been out driving and some idiot stick cuts you off and practically causes a car accident, and immediately what do? You idiot!
Why even go there? Why go there, Sherri? Like,
well, because it's kind of fun. I saw what had happened last week on Thursday.
Of someone cutting someone off. Did you guys hear about the news? Brampton?
In Brampton? Oh, that lady. Yeah, that was really bad.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah,
Horrible.
terrible.
Like, there's just no, I don't even know how that man will, you know, pull his life back together after all of that.
Terrible.
Yeah, not good, not good. So I apologize if that was maybe badly chosen. But the idea behind that comment is simply, in that split second, we've created for ourselves a decision about that person. Right? They're an idiot. They're dumb. I won't even go through the list of things I've heard people say.
Go ahead. Explain. Go ahead. Right.
I don't think we can use those. They'll be like bleep, 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 bleep in the recording later. But I think what's really important is we all recognize that we've also been the person who's done that probably at some point. And sometimes we don't even realize we've done it. We may not want to admit it. You know, you've done something because you weren't thinking, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, sorry, my bad, sorry, you know, and you continue on your way. But what's that other person saying about you? And does that make it true? No, absolutely not. But in that split second, with only this much information, we've made a decision about that person. And unfortunately, so many things in life, it comes down to that. And we don't have the backstory behind that person who just went through the intersection, that wasn't paying attention, and, you know, it was our turn to go and they went instead, or whatever the situation is. We don't have any more information than the fact that they made that one poor choice or mistake. We don't know that they maybe just got some really bad news and they're completely distracted, and maybe they shouldn't have been driving, but they're on their way to handle an emergency situation.
Yeah, we go off of misinformation.
What's that?
We go off of misinformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so to me, I often have to pull myself back and think, you know what, I've done that. I've, forgotten to, put my signal on, or been distracted by something else, or in the last week sent a text that was talking about something earlier in a conversation. Somebody took it and ran the other direction with it. And I was like, I don't even know how we got from that to that. I probably could have worded the text better, but in that split second of information, there's so many things that are filtering into that. We have our own perceptions. We have our own emotional reactions. We have distractions. We have all sorts of things that are influencing whatever happens in that moment. And so recognizing that in situations when we're dealing with anyone, a customer who just walked through the door, or someone who picked up the phone and they're completely annoyed because something they ordered from you or service they were expecting didn't quite meet the expectations that they had, being able to put yourself in their situation and understand, not just understand what they're annoyed about, but what could be the 40 things that led them into this space where this was the thing that caused the meltdown. Because we've all had those, right? Like, I remember actually getting pulled over by a police officer once, and I'm not the type of girl who turns on tears at all, trust me. But you know, I've been having like a week, and and I don't even remember now what was going on, but it was bad. It was very bad week, like a series of things that were really big. And I got pulled over, and I kid you not, by the time he got to my car, I was hysterical. And he was like, "Are you okay?" Because I clearly wasn't just pretending that I was upset. He had no idea why I was crying. For all he knew, I was just upset because I got pulled over. But what I was actually crying about was, it was like, oh, of course, one more thing. So we oftentimes don't recognize all of that backstory stuff. So I want to start with what the first step, this is my superpower against, that we can all develop, not just mine, that we can develop against you know, this lack of empathy and in building empathy. And this is the most important word that you will ever hear in learning how to understand your customers. And that word is curiosity. So now we're going to play a little game. What I want you guys to understand is that curiosity comes in the form of a question. It's not it's not an assumption. It's not a, well, she must have been, or he must have been. It's not that at all. It's actually asking the question. So we're going to kind of practice with this a little bit today. And so what I want to do is, I want you guys to come up with the questions. We're going to put ourselves in this situation where it doesn't matter whether we're a colleague with Annie and Laura, or whether you're their boss, or it doesn't matter who you are. You could just be friends with both of them and having a conversation. But what I want you guys to do is, I want you to come up with the questions that you might ask that would help give you context. Why is that important? Why would that matter? So we're not answering those questions, we're just asking them. Does everybody understand?
Asking the right questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Asking the right question. So what question might you be asking? And you can be asking the questions of either of them or both of them at the same time.
That's interesting.
What questions? Why do you think?
Well, I'd love to know, what is the trigger with the shirt?
Okay, good one. What else we got?
I would like to know why the person, is it Anna, that wears the religious symbols, feels that she needs to bring her politics into a nonprofit setting.
Okay.
Just to get the context of it, right?
Okay. What other questions?
How would that person feel about other people expressing a different religious belief?
Okay, good. Keep going.
Have you ever told her that that bothers you?
What else?
You know, it's funny because we never question the symbols of atheism. Ever, right?
Okay, so what's the question?
Well, I'm just saying that that how do you remove all religious symbols from any environment when there's a baseline religion of atheism that is everywhere and acceptable, but someone bringing in Muslim religious gear or Christian religious gear or whatever it is not acceptable. I think that we have to look at all religion. So
okay, remember, we're sticking to questions about Annie and Laura. So what's the question?
So I guess to Laura, can you identify atheistic religious symbols that are around the office and explain how we can remove them also?
Okay. All right. Keep going, guys. What else we got?
Probably what got them to the sort of belief where they actually need to have those religious beliefs, right?
Good.
Like, how do they get to that conclusion?
Good. What else? What else are you curious about these two ladies before you had to make a decision, or you had to be supportive, or choose a right and wrong, or any of those things, or none of those things? What other things are you curious about?
Have you ever thought of just going out for coffee?
Okay, good. Sorry, I heard somebody else, but I didn't see who it
I
was.
wonder how they behave in other settings. Do they always act like this, or is it a specific setting that not triggers it, but like motivates that, I guess?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, how many people have bumped into someone who's uber religious one day and the next day?
Yeah.
Are you just picking
The
a
other way
religious
around.
fight today because I'm doing something?
Okay, that's a really valid question. Is it really about that at all?
Yeah.
Right? Good. Sorry, Maggie, what were you going to say?
I would say sort of he was saying, they're religious one day and then not. Could be the other way around too. I've seen that happen.
Okay.
I would ask, is there something more than just the religious stuff that's bothering, that's causing the situation?
Okay, good. Keep going. What else?
How long has this been going on?
Good. What do you want to know about these ladies individually?
I think I'd want to know something about their background, like if they're American, for example, was one of them born maybe in a southern state where certain beliefs are more prominent than in other states, or
It does sound like a very American situation, doesn't it?
Well, when you say Republicans, yeah. But
It could in Ireland, though.
I was actually going to ask. That relates to both of the things that you just rose.
Yeah, and it's a valid point because it could very well have been in Ireland, and that was the other thing, right?
But how many of these targeted questions can you actually legally ask?
Oh yeah, that's that's a totally different situation. But remember, we're not talking about this from a business owner or the HR perspective. Yeah, we're just looking at this from a communication perspective, right? What else do you guys have?
So I would say that I'd like to know what's causing the angst, what exactly why, talking about their backgrounds, talking about where they've come from, their upbringing, that sort of thing. I'd like to understand basically from that point of view first before making any judgment call. I'm using that word loosely, judgment, because we're not supposed to judge others, and that's what I do when I'm dealing with arguments or I'm dealing with conflict. And I've dealt with a lot of it because I've been the head of different boards. I've been on many different boards, and I've had these encounters many times. But I don't try to use any judgment on any person. The only thing I judge is the actions themselves and what the results of those actions were. And then I take those ideas into consideration, and then I will then use that to determine, who's leaning on which end of the scale. And
so those are really, really good points, because believe it or not, that actually is our next point, which is judgment. So
Possible not to judge. Is that realistic?
Well, let's be real. We are who we are. We have our own sets of values and philosophies, and that's exactly it. But can you put yourself in a situation where you can have a philosophical disagreement with somebody about something? So whether it is something like, I know we shouldn't talk about religion and politics, right? But if we can't talk about that, how do we get better at talking about tough stuff, which is one of the biggest problems going on right now? It's not about not being able to wage against our own values. That is something we have to do every day, because we have to decide, am I okay with working with people who have different values, different philosophies, and different ways of doing things? We all individually need to know for ourselves what of those things matter to us, because we have to make the decision. If you and I, Sita, are working on a project together, for example, and let's just say we have we're in totally different spheres, but something's gone wrong, And my philosophy is to say, well, I think that it's perfectly okay to tell the customer a little white lie about what's happened. They don't need to know, and it'll be fine. But you are very firmly a believer that no matter what, you need to own it, and you need to be upfront with the customer about what's happening. Is one of those the wrong way to do it, and is one of those the right way to do it? Maybe and maybe not.
That's a good question.
Yeah, and so, you know, we end up in these, there's all of these, you know, ethical dilemmas. I mean, you can find them on the internet all over the place, but when you're talking about that kind of a situation, then if you can't be able to have that conversation about, I have a different political view than you, and can we find common ground? Is really what it's about. But the problem is we have to be able to remove judgment. We have to be able to remove our own glasses that we see everything through, and take a moment to put on their glasses and try to understand what they might see, what they might have experienced that brought them to that point. And no, we're not necessarily going to do this with everybody, but when we're talking about trying to understand our customers, that's what the idea is here, right? So if you took off your glasses and you put on somebody else's glasses, and then you could suddenly see the world the way that they see the world, and suddenly you're like, yeah, I'm totally a Republican now, when before I was a liberal, or vice versa. And then you still went, God, this is horrible. I totally disagree with this. I mean, the idea is we still are allowed to have our own views and values and opinions, but can we still work with people? And removing that judgment gives us space to simply understand. And if you recognize that in a period of time, I simply cannot work with this person, the intention is not that you're supposed to lash out to that person. The intention is not that it's not about creating consequences for them, but it gives you the choice. It empowers you to decide what you need to do to make this situation work or not work, right? This lady may decide she needs to quit. Maybe the bosses are also, you know, believe in the same things, and she's totally in the wrong place. She is in the wrong business. I have a friend who lives in Texas. She was born and raised in Ohio. And she, the stories, she also worked for Homeland Security, but that's another story. And, you know, she was born and raised in a very, very liberal environment. And then she met her husband and they fell in love, and she moved to Texas. And she's like the closet liberal down there. And she will very often talk about that. But she learned to be able to look at the perspectives of people down there. Why do they think the way that they do? So even though she totally disagrees with it, she understands how they got to that point. I would choose a different path, but that doesn't make the path right or wrong, right? If I said I'm going from here to Kingston and here's the route that I'm taking to Kingston, I want the scenic route, I want to see all the back roads and the tiny towns and blah, blah, blah. But you said I'm taking the 400, I want to get there like that. Is one of those wrong?
You can't take the 400 to Kingston.
Sorry, you're right, the 401.
It's wrong. Right?
So clearly one of those is wrong.
I actually have a question.
Yeah, for sure.
It's regard to conflict, right? I think that's it's gonna come up, and so what's the question? What's at the heart of it? Like, what is it really about? Because I feel like it's a hurdle that, like, it's a challenge that can, you know, that you can, like, work through. But I think, like, more understanding would be helpful, you know?
That's a great question. I will tell you that my answer to that is unmatched expectations. I perceive things one way, I see things, I expect things, I live a certain way, I make certain choices, somebody else makes them differently. I think if you look at the heart of pretty much any, and those expectations are going to be built on different things, right? It could just simply be a project. I said I was going to do this, and you said you were going to do that, and you didn't do it. Now we have a conflict. But it could be much deeper than that. And that's why this becomes really important, is because if you can learn the idea of, I mean, you know, if you want to make that judgment in the back of your mind, or you need to make that judgment to make a business decision in the back of your mind, then that's what you have to do. But the idea is to understand your customer, to understand your colleagues, to understand those who you're going to work with. It could be vendors, it could be anybody. Learning to understand that putting yourself in a place of empathy and understanding how to remove judgment allows you to find the solutions to those conflicts. That was a very well placed question.
So here's a question for you. So you know, I hear what you're saying. I'm just gonna throw this thought out there, okay? Sometimes I find that for things to change, there needs to be conflict, right? Sometimes for things to change, it's okay to be. I can be empathetic. I get where you're coming from. I understand what you're saying. You know, I've listened, and you know, I disagree. But in disagreeing and then sharing my point, you know, it's going to escalate to a conflict situation. Things
wow, that was well timed.
You know, my brain is making things move over here. Anyway, so but at the end of it, and I'll tell you some funny stories that other people have told me, is that they said, oh, you know, I remember when I first met this person. Now they're my best friend. It started in conflict, and then, you know, disagreement, but then we became pals, right? Or you know, this person doesn't understand, or I didn't understand, and we had this big fight. And then, you know, and then I went away and I thought about it, and then other things, and I realized, oh my gosh, they were right. You know what I mean? But if they came to me and they were just trying to find common ground and all that stuff, then there would be no growth or no learning. There's none of that. So anyway, that's my view. Thoughts?
And I just want to add to, like, I feel like constructive criticism, I'm in a position where I would love some, right? Because it opens me up to see things differently. I think it's the kind of criticism or the kind of conflict that leads to nowhere that's kind of irritating, and you gotta learn to just leave it alone, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to find real and legitimate and what's not.
And you're talking about conflict from a business standpoint, or are you talking about just in general?
I think in general, yeah, like overall.
Yeah, so, I mean, in business, though, I mean, you're talking about user experience, right? I mean, that's generally what we're looking to achieve. Yep. We want the user to have the best experience. To me, and you know, I mean, I have a lot of clients that are in the southern states. I don't really care about their politics. I really don't. I mean, I love them. We hang out when we go down there. We're pals. If they happen to have, I don't really, you know, if they ask me, hey, Ivan, you know, how do you feel about, you know, about Donald Trump, right? You know, I have a lot of feelings about Donald Trump, right?
I think that's very good.
And the feelings I have about Donald Trump are not always on the negative side. I mean, there's some things about Donald Trump that I think are awesome, right? There are. I mean, if anybody has any sort of investments, you know, there's some things about Donald Trump that I don't know if I have all the information.
And see, this is exactly though where we're headed with that, and that's the idea. It is not about you saying, "Oh, now I understand you, and now I can't, yeah. You know, it's not about that. This is an information collecting process. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not going to follow the information collecting process, you're not going to learn. And so what you're saying is exactly what the point is. But it's about taking that conflict, that thing that is not understood, and breaking it apart so you can understand it. At the end of all of this, right, as a business owner or a person in a relationship, you're ultimately going to make the decision about what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. And you're going to decide, can I still work with this person even though he likes Donald Trump sometimes? Or can I work with this person because, you know, this is where they came from in their history, and so I perceive that a certain way. I mean, all of those things, we can't control other people's perceptions. What we can control, though, is what we do with the information we take in. And if we say, well, if someone's coming from a background of this, and so that creates this kind of person, and I'm really not comfortable working with them, well, there's probably a good chance then your business model needs some examination. So it is what you guys are talking about right now, but it's the idea of recognizing that we need to collect information so that we are able to make better decisions, that we are able to adapt. But we are only going to adapt or make decisions based on our own values in the end of that, or our own philosophies, or our own business structures, or whatever.
Yeah.
All of that information that you're gathering in this empathy process, you still have to fit it in that business model. You still have to fit it in that relationship, right?
Yeah, and I just want to throw this last point out. From a Christian standpoint, if you happen to be Christian, right?
And before you say that, can I just say this? This wasn't, I mean, clearly this isn't something I'm hoping that you're having conversations with your customers about.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't about that. I chose topics that were intentionally a little bit controversial to get the point going, right? Not because this should be an issue. Sorry, go ahead.
So the point is that, I always love it when Christians will say certain things about people or whatever it is, and there's a principle here, and that is that we only respond to what is visible, right? Visible sin, the thing that you see out there that they're doing, right? And we respond to that, but we don't know, as you were saying before, we don't know, the person who comes across as being this perfect person, out in public, but they're a devil at home, right? I mean, you have no idea, and we make judgments based on what we see, right? And so what you have to realize is that you don't see everything. You have no idea. The people who love Donald Trump, they love hope in America, right? That's not a bad thing. They love hope in America. They want America to be great again, right? So to me, that's something I can commend. That's amazing. So, but what we don't see is the struggle that they're having, why they have that hope in America, right? That they really need for things to work out a certain way. So all I'm saying is that what you see is that tip of the iceberg, but you don't know every struggle, every pain, every death in the family, everything that's brought them to this point. And that, that's unfortunate, but I'm kind of glad that people can't look at me and see everything I've been through, right? So there you go.
Well, and that's a really valid point. Can you imagine that if we wore all of those experiences that lead us to see on our sleeves? I mean,
and I think that's also the frustration part when you can't see it. And so it almost feels like you have no choice but to go off on your judgment because you can't see anything else.
So there's a really great book.
You need to give up your thinking to just start absorbing new information.
Yeah, for sure. There's a really great book by, you're going to laugh, Kathryn's going to laugh at me. There's a great book by Simon Sinek, and it's called Talking to Strangers. And it is very, very timely right now. So if you have an opportunity, I love it. She has it. Have you read it?
Yes, I started reading like the first part about Sandra.
Yes.
And then it's very timely given like the protest and the discussion about police brutality right now. Sandra Bland. Yeah, yes. I just started like reading this.
So I have the audiobook, and let me tell you that him reading it, and they have the background music and all that kind of stuff that goes with it, which I don't know if you're at that. I don't know if he mentions that in the book.
No,
so
yeah, like the real recordings.
Yeah, and it's very powerful, but it's called Talking to Strangers, and it's got the, is that the one that's got the story about the spies? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, I finished that part too. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so, he's talking about spies, like professional spies, world spies. These people should be able to tell when someone's lying to them and understanding other people. Yeah, they suck at it, by the way. That's something you need to know from this book. He also talks about judges. And if they create a model of comparison where they take a judge with many years on the bench, been a lawyer, all that sort of stuff, and allow him to, provide his judgment and sentencing on offenders, but beside that, they also used a computer software. Adam would love this. Developed software that uses specific points to make a judgment and a decision. The likelihood that the person the judge felt the need to look in the eye and decide whether he thought they would reoffend or not, whether they were trustworthy or not, whether they were actually feeling sorry or not, it was much more likely that the judge would free the ones who were probably more likely to reoffend, significant percentage.
Wow.
So it's very important for us to recognize that we can't look at somebody and think we know. We can't read somebody the way we think we can when the professional people whose lives depend on doing that can't do it.
Right.
We can't assume that we should be able to do it. And that's why
We have
it's so,
to accept the limitation.
what's that?
We have to accept the limitations.
We do, but the avenue for us to open up, to be aware, and to not be misled by our instincts to say, I looked that guy in the eye and he said he wouldn't do it again, so I believe him. Don't do it. But this is a process that allows us to start to ask questions to understand. And as much as we understand what got someone to here, it also helps us to understand what to expect in the future from them, right? Past behaviors is likely to
And also,
it's funny.
trust the information, right? I think it comes back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, we're gathering information so that we can decide what do we want to do about this situation every single time.
So I watched a video a couple months ago where this guy was saying, don't have a price list, you know, where you have a price list with everything else. He goes, no, have, he goes, read your customer to figure out what you think he can pay and then price accordingly, right? I thought, I mean, based on what you're speaking about today, that's us going in with all of our baggage, all of our preconceived ideas, and then looking at Kathryn and going, oh, 10 grand. Yeah, you look rich. Anyway.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. I'm very good at creating, you know, the impression that I want to create for you, right? But how good is the next person and how good is the next person? So I can create this impression that's totally different than the reality. Like you said, I could be a train wreck underneath, but I look like I got my crap together out here.
Could I share something?
Yeah, for sure, Julia, go ahead.
I belong to a group. I'm doing a program with this coach in Australia. It's for people who do hypnosis and things like that. And this person posted in the group the other day that he had done 3 strategy calls with 3 potential clients. 2 were professional business people who probably made really big bucks. 1 was a student. His program cost about $5,000. The 2 guys that were the professionals with the, you know, big salaries couldn't afford them, but the student could. So never make that assumption.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Oh, that's a whole different conversation. But you're absolutely right, and that's one of the most important things is our eyes deceive us, our instincts will deceive us, and that's really tough. A lot of entrepreneurs live in a space where they trust their gut, and I have always taught team members that worked below me to trust their gut. But the important part about trusting your gut is don't necessarily assume that you know what it's telling you, but if it says something's not right here, that should be the moment when you say, this is curiosity coming in. What do I need to know about this person to understand why they're coming at me with this angle? What do I need to know about this person to understand whether or not I believe them, I trust them, I like them, I want to work with them, I share values with them? Imagine that we could take this huge color chart and against that color chart, we could put our life's experiences and our values and who we are, and each one of those gets a color. And for every one of those things, we get another pair of glasses of that color and we keep putting them on. Now, I know anybody who does anything with color, see this probably like you're going to end up with brown at the end. But you know what happens when you mix all those colors together? But you imagine that you have all of these different pairs of glasses on. We have to take all of those off for just a few minutes, because if we can understand, then we can understand how we can better serve those customers.
Yeah.
What do they need through their own eyes, not through ours?
Yeah, sure. I think empathy isn't wishy-washy. Like I even mentioned earlier about, well, you know, because we need conflict. I think empathy is a position of power because you've done that logical instead of emotional, right? So that if you've got all the facts and been curious and then your gut says something, then you can trust it because you've done it in a non-partisan way, non-biased way, right? And that allows you to, not have conversations with your clients about what the order is. You just talk about how was your fishing trip, how was Father's Day yesterday, and business just comes through it that way.
And the reality is that
non-biased like that.
Yeah, and the reality is that the better that you understand your clients, the more that you're able to ask those curious questions, they're going to give you testimonials in those curious questions. They're going to give you exactly the most important things about your business, because you're going to say to them, why does this piece matter to you? Like, what are you getting out of this? Why do you care about this? In some cases, they're very melancholy about it. Oh, when I was a kid growing up, and I just really loved this thing. And so that's why I want to do it. And you're like, okay, this is clearly an emotional issue for them. And this piece of what I do is emotional. So if that's the most important thing that I'm putting out there to my clients, I need to get it out there to them in an emotional way. But if I'm doing something like Adam does, where it's probably not so much an emotional thing because it's connected to my childhood, and it's more a case of perhaps it's something entirely different. I mean, they want to be, top of the field. They want to be the cutting edge. It's still emotional, but understanding why that emotional matters, again, it allows you to pull out of them that information that helps you. They are talking to you because they're just talking to you. And every time they tell you something, they're sharing a piece of information that's of benefit. So if they're talking about that fishing trip, that's great. But what are they telling you? They're the kind of person who actually values that peace and quiet time. I'm someone who needs to go away to recharge. How does that relate to your business? Right? It may not relate to yours at all, Kathryn, but it might, right? So, and this is the important part, your ability to shut off your own judgment and your own emotions enough to collect data in a non-emotional way, but then to also be able to place yourself in their position once you've collected that data and be like, yeah, I can see how they get there. How many people have watched, Adam's gonna laugh. How many people have watched the new Joker movie? Anybody? Okay. No, we're only Nate. What, you haven't watched it, Adam?
I kind of I saw some of the coverage behind it, and I was kind of like, I'm okay.
Yeah, and
I'm okay.
I will tell you this. At the end of it, I was like, okay, that was brilliant and scarring, and I do mean scarring.
You know what, Sherri, a film producer I worked with years ago, he posted on his board, he just basically knocked that thing and said, you know what, I don't even know why that movie was made. It is the worst movie. He goes, I hate to see what society ends up afterwards if everybody saw this movie. So for that reason, I have not watched it.
Okay, so let me tell you the premise of it. It's the story of the Joker told from before he becomes Joker. And so through the entire, and I'm sure there's other movies, this just happens to be the most current one that I could think of, but it's how he ended up being the Joker. And at the end, you're kind of like, I don't want to admit that I'm like, I don't blame the guy. You can see why he ended up in the position he ended up becoming the Joker. Of course, I'm not going to make
that's the background.
Yeah, it's literally like long before. And he comes off as this very meek and mild, he's kind of very, very downtrodden. Things happened to him that he had like no control over that just made it even worse. So you get to this point by the end of the movie, and it really, truly is scarring. If you haven't seen it, don't go and see it. But it's the premise of the movie. So you can go through that process and you get to the end, you're like, yeah, so he's still a horrible person. But how he got to being a horrible person, I now get it. It doesn't mean that I relate to it on the scale of like, I want to be like him. It means I relate to it on a scale of, okay, I can recognize points in my life where stuff has happened where I probably felt similar to the way that he felt experiencing all of those things that got him there. And that's what this is all about. I jokingly say we have friends who are Scotch lovers. Anybody? Yeah.
Where's Michael? No?
Yeah. So I remember this conversation, and trust me, I've tried Scotch. My family is Scottish and Irish, so trust me, I've tried it. I have been to Scotch tastings. I can sit through the Scotch tasting. They can say, okay, you're going to taste peat in this one. Take a sip. Here's what we want you to do. Here's how it goes. And you're like, yeah, okay. It's disgusting, but I can taste the peat in it. It doesn't mean I have to like it. And that's what this is all about.
At least you got the warning.
Yeah. Okay, so as a point of proof, I want to just share another piece of this story. But here's the thing that I want you to think about. If the background story is there, does it matter to you? And I'm going to give you the why, so you don't have to answer that. So here's the backstory about Annie. Annie grew up in an extremely non-religious home. At a fairly young age, she actually became an alcoholic. She had a decent job and was in college, but she ended up losing out on her education because she became an alcoholic, started doing some other drugs, and in a very short period of time became homeless. She got pregnant, went through some serious trauma over that, ended up losing the baby, and really was at the bottom of the barrel. There was not a lot more worse stuff that could happen to her than what had already happened. So if you can imagine it, it's happened. At one point, she turns to prostitution because she has no other option to be able to feed herself. A local nonprofit shelter and rehab facility at the time was being run and operated by that local current Republican candidate that was providing, counseling services, helping to get her clean and off the street. That candidate was strongly Christian and used not only her knowledge of the 12-step program, but also her faith and her beliefs to help that recovery process. She sponsored her, helped her get clean. Now, this woman is now 55 years old. And at 55 years old, she's learned a lot of things. She was able to do the exact same thing for 5 more women who were in very similar situations. And each time she supported them with her Christian faith and with that 12-step program. She keeps her symbols close to her because as an addict, every single day she fights that, every single day. And that's the thing that she holds near and dear. She might have had a lucky rabbit's foot, but she didn't. She decided that those were the things that were going to keep her on the straight and narrow. She uses some of those to keep her focused when she does some of her activities that she learned to do through this counseling program. Some of them were gifts from some of the women that she helped to recover, and one of them was actually a gift from her sponsor as well. She lives with the fear every single day that she's going to fall off the wagon again, so she holds pretty fiercely to those beliefs and to those people. And now every year she works with kids of parents battling the same issues and helps them find comfort in the same things. Now, I haven't told you Laura's story, but do you now feel differently about this situation in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, with the background, you're just like, okay, that it's starting to add up, the pieces starting to put together, and the desire to yield, to feel sympathy and empathy is more there. It's activated more, right? As opposed to just looking at the outward result and calling it a day on your judgment.
I'm more empathetic, but it doesn't change what my ultimate decision was on how this should have been handled, or what the ultimate answer to the question is, like who's right and who's wrong. So
right, okay,
I'll just hold that thought.
Other thoughts?
Empathy, sure. Excusing it, or at the very least, letting that be a factor in the decision making behind it doesn't really do anything for me, because it's not about what she believes. It's about what the politician in question believes, right? And it's kind of tough to take that at face value and I wouldn't trust that, person as far as I could throw them. So I would be very, very, very
Sorry.
wary.
Help me to understand what you mean by that. So at the beginning you had said that I was trying to understand what you were saying. So what you're saying is that this lady's beliefs are actually just that person's beliefs?
Yeah, that's hers. That's totally fine. She can believe whatever she likes, but my problem isn't what she believes. My problem is the politician in question. Right?
But we don't know anything about the politician in question. The politician in question really isn't even the question so much.
He's Republican.
There you go. And from there, you can find out that guy's voting history. You can find out the kinds of things that they've said, what they've voted for, right?
So her behavior to you is entirely hinged to the politician that she's connected to.
Or at the very least, the beliefs that she has, right?
You know, I'll tell you, it is interesting. What a crazy conundrum. But I think that the way it works for me is that knowing that backstory, knowing that backstory would it's not going to change the outcomes of the conversation. I mean, the conversation has to go along the lines of what HR is doing, what the policies are of the board. I mean, she's not even in a regular corporation; she's in a not-for-profit, right? So there are certain guidelines that are different than a regular corporation. But what it would do is it would change the way that I deliver the verdict, right? It won't be, all right, Bob, it'd be a little bit more empathetic and listen, I understand, blah, 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 but however, I'd take a little bit more time trying to explain what it is.
It's true. But at the end of the day, no one can tell you how to run your business or who to do business with or what values you should have or what belief systems that you should have. But I think the important part of all of this really comes down to if you want to be able to understand why communication is so important, you really just have to look at how many conflicts exist out there that can't be resolved because people are not able to hear both sides of a story and make a non-emotional sort of I don't want to say judgment out of it because that's not what I mean, but to understand it from a non-judgmental standpoint, and then be able to go back and apply their own values and philosophies and that sort of stuff to it. And it is a process. It is very important to be able to do that because that is a very big piece of that conflict resolution. So whether we do it well, or whether we don't do it well, and sometimes we do it well, and then, it's like the family, right? There's certain people who will always know exactly how to trigger you, and they do it. We all have someone in the family who does that.
Which buttons to push.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I know that this is 9 and that's 1.
That's funny.
Right? So ultimately what I wanted was really just to give you guys a little insight into why empathy can be valuable in dealing with whoever. Obviously, we're talking about our businesses and building it. But if you really want to figure out how to serve your customers, you need to be able to get in their heads. You need to be able to figure out what they're willing to spend the money on. You could choose to do anything. You could choose to build widgets. But if the people that you're selling to don't have a need for widgets, you're in the wrong market. If the people that you're selling to are in the market for widgets, but they're not picking you, then you need to understand what it is that is missing in your business. And unless you're willing to put your own stuff aside and just listen, it's going to be very difficult to really connect. Some businesses, it doesn't matter. It's maybe completely irrelevant. I don't know whose business, but
Yeah,
I'm looking around, I'm like, I don't know that there's anybody on this call that I can say that's actually the case, but I don't think, I truly believe that the more that we can connect with the people that we're working with, even if we don't necessarily always agree. Ivan, you and I have lots of things that we don't necessarily agree on. We have some very different views about things, but we work well together. We somehow manage to duke it out and then we're over. No, we don't actually.
But Sherri, on top of that, I'll just say this about anybody who's ever gone out for a job interview, right? Or if you've been hiring people, it's funny when people come for a job interview here and I say, okay, so did you take a look at our website? No, really? You didn't even look at our website? Do you know anything about what we do? You're just looking for a job. It doesn't matter, So, but when a person comes in and they've done their research, they know a little bit about who we are and what we do. So they've already built some sort of, empathy, I guess, or some sort of interest in our business. Then I feel a little bit, because they're already seeing themselves fitting into that scenario and working with us. So, hopefully nobody here goes to a job interview without research, right? I mean, honestly. So anyway.
Okay, so you guys, just really quick thoughts about what you gained from the conversation today. 10 seconds, we're going to go around really quickly. So Julia, let's start with you.
Learn that I need to look a bit closer at people and put some of my own judgments aside.
Okay, awesome. Nancy, sorry. I literally went to say your name and I realized she's trying to drink. Nancy, what about you?
To walk into these kind of communications or like meetings or situations with an open mindset.
Okay, very cool. Kathryn Davies?
That I'm following the right path, but I just have to make sure that I keep it up and not let judgment, gut instinct, and knee-jerk reactions get in the way.
Awesome, very cool. Maggie?
Again, just to try to put myself in other people's shoes, which is not easy to do. Just try to find more about them too, and just to listen more.
Very cool. Sita, how about you?
I thought overall it was very insightful. Like this is why I keep coming back, because I'm always getting something new out of the meeting. Particularly today, I think it was just a reminder to continue to allow my thinking to put it on halt, because I think for me that it's the name of the game for me is good listening skills. So I can't think and listen at the same time.
Me either.
Right. So for me, I've been meditating to quiet my thinking, and already that's already helped me to process information. Because I think for me, the reason why my listening skills are so poor, because I'm an overthinker. So when a person talks, I'm thinking about so that was the only thing. So when I stopped thinking so much, now I'm hearing them clearly, and I don't have to ask them to repeat or all of that, So for me, it was so it was good to be reminded that, those judgments and those way of like coming up with notions and preconceived ideas of what it's really unnecessary in the name of like trying to gather like the information from the person. And also that nonverbal communication, communication has,
Yeah, that's true. We haven't even talked about that. That's probably a good conversation for another day. So thank you. Aiden, what about you?
Yeah, so this is one of my weaknesses, empathy. I've had some friends actually tell me many times that, I don't seem to be able to get what empathy is. And so I'm very glad that this was very insightful and helped me to understand a little bit more about empathy. I tend to be very good at sympathy, but not empathy. And actually, that could be a lesson for the next one, to follow that. What is the difference between empathy and sympathy?
That is a great topic.
Because they're very, very, very similar. And they're almost alike, like each other. So there's going to be commonalities between the two, and there's just going to be maybe one or two differences that will tell you whether you're leaning on the sympathy path or the empathy path.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Ivan, what about you?
Am I on mute? No. Okay. Always happens. So, the thing first, communication is about, just being a little bit more empathetic and listening more, obviously. And then the other thing is, I thought it would be cool to have this conversation every 6 months. You know, put it into the schedule. You know, it's a great reminder. I mean, we know this stuff, right? But it makes total sense. But I think that just having this every 6 months as one of our discussion topics would be awesome.
Cool. Okay, that sounds good. Kathryn Kissinger, how about you?
It's good to have the reminder about the curiosity point, right? The getting beyond just what you see, you know, the religious artifacts and the I'm an atheist and we're butting heads, but to get beyond that and to understand what's behind it so that we can serve both the customers and our people better, right? We need to exercise that curiosity, ask the question, right? And I have found teaching the international students from India that most people are very receptive when you ask them to share their stories. I mean, in some cases they may not be if they've had a rough time, but you know, in general, they're happy to share differences of opinion and why they feel the way they feel. And it's a good reminder to be able to put our feelings on the shelf and set them aside and just to listen. As Sita was saying, stop thinking about it and just listen to what the person's saying so that we can then come back at it from a different perspective. I find sometimes that I come into an organization thinking, oh, well, this is their problem. Well, they obviously need this and this and this and this. And then I get in there and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, yes, that employer was completely boom, 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 boom with her staff. But then you find out that, you know, she's got some health issues. They're playing games. You know, they come from a background where they were unionized and federally regulated and worked in that atmosphere for 20 years. And now they're dealing with employment standards that they have no idea what they're doing with.
And, you know, that's a really important point because there's never just one thing.
Never
right?
one thing.
There's never just one thing. And especially when you're talking about those kinds of situations, I find the same thing. I get on the phone and I'm talking to the owner of a business and he's like, yeah, we need some expertise in here with some of the staff, you know, they're lazy and these ones are this and these ones who are, you know, those millennial kids. And, you know, and you're thinking, okay, all right, no problem. I got this figured out. And then you go in and you start talking. And I mean, he creates obviously certain issues because of, you know, certain perceptions. But then he doesn't understand that there are, you know, 50 other things that led up to, and some of them are this person and some are this person and some are this person. And again, it's the same thing. How many pairs of glasses do we have on that are how many different colors that we have to be able to take those all off? So that's awesome. Thank you, Kathryn. Adam, what about you?
Probably to have patience with others, that even if you don't have the exact same belief as the other person, that's totally fine. You can still find middle ground. There are lots of other ways to bridge differences between people that are otherwise untenable, as long as you have the patience for it, right?
Yes.
Some part of it as well, I wanted to sort of tie into the idea behind social responsibility. So if that person knowingly knows that kind of stuff and it's malicious, there's sort of a responsibility not to work with them because they may not necessarily change their minds. They may dig deeper into their heels, right? Some part of it's about tact, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Thank you. Theresa, I know you're on mute, and but I'm not sure. If not, that's okay. That's okay. We get the echoey thing going on.
You know, they say don't judge a book by its cover. Well, in this situation, you really can't. But I'll tell you that, you know, some of my best friendships came from, you know, looking at the cover and going, that person's, you know, a terrible person. And then, you know, within the year, we're best friends and have been best friends forever, right? So, you know, you really need to watch, because that person could become your best friend at some point. So, you know, it's nice to not be able to judge, even though as humans, that's what we do. And sometimes we overjudge, but just, you know, understanding that a person's a person, they have a lot of things that they go through just like you. And there is a huge iceberg underneath that little piece that you see. So we do have to be careful on what we're judging people as.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Wonderful. You guys are amazing. Okay. Well, I hope that you're able to take a little bit of that process, that curiosity piece, and then look at stuff without judgment, back and think about how can I utilize that in talking to some of my customers, my colleagues, my vendors, my, whatever that may be, and in whatever other relationships that you have. Yeah, I am always open for feedback. So I love when you guys give me the suggestions about what other things we can talk about, because that's me listening to you guys.
So you brought up millennials. I just
Yes.
wanted to say, this is the Millennial Handbook. It's written by Jonathan Linnatock. And this would be a good thing if you're trying to understand millennials and trying to communicate with other millennials. This is a good handbook to have and to read. It's full of very insightful things. It's wonderful. I know the author, Jonathan Linnatock, and she's quite a firecracker herself. She's a wonderful lady. She's come and spoke here at Grace Gallery before. This is actually her 5th book she's actually released.
Very cool.
I didn't know there was a handbook, so I'm so happy. I need that book. Yeah.
It's interesting because there is a sort of whole stream of people doing cultural training and coaching services, and cultural from the different time zone, or not time zones, sorry, different generations, time zones. It's kind of similar. So different generations, but also between countries. Sometimes in the same country, there are different, traditions and things that happen from area to area. We have Quebec that has a lot of differences. And so if you're doing business here all of your life, and then you try to do business in Quebec and don't speak French, there are a lot of things that you would need to learn and understand. So that's actually a very interesting point. That's not necessarily my area of expertise. I do work in disability and inclusion, but that's a little bit different. So anyway, so that is an interesting area. Maybe one day we'll do a topic around that. We'll have to see if we can fit that one in. So, what's that?
I just wanted to let everybody know about Thursday morning. It's our Tech Talk. We have the creators of interactive PDF going to be a guest and showing us how we can have these cool little interactions on very bland PDFs, right? I saw some of the system and it was pretty cool. It's something I wasn't aware of. So yeah, so that's this Thursday on Tech Talk. Okay.
Awesome. And Wednesday night, Melissa does the Mastermind Jam sessions at 8:30, I believe it is, on Wednesday nights, way past my bedtime. So, so you don't generally see me there. And I think that that's all we have at the moment. Obviously, I will see you guys next week. Thank you for coming. We will continue to provide you with lots of material and opportunities to network through this great city. And so we're hoping that we will see you at all of the fun events next week.
Yeah, and if you have not become a citizen, of course, citizenship is free. You just get onto thisgreatcity.com and click on the link that says join as an individual. And that way you get on our mailing list and you get all the cool promotions and incentives that are being offered through our members.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody. This was great.
Yeah,
Have a
thank you
great
very
week,
much.
guys.
Have a great day, guys.
Bye.
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 Bye, guys.
Mm-hmm.